Welcome to the Commonwealth Club of California. I'm John Zipper, the club's vice president of media and editorial, and the co-host of these Michelle Meow Show programs at the club. Now, we hope you are staying safe and are healthy wherever you are, and we look forward to seeing you in person one day again at the Commonwealth Club's headquarters in San Francisco. Until that happens, we're doing all of our programming online. This is the latest in more than 350 programs we've done just since the pandemic shut everything down. You can find all of our upcoming programs as well as podcasts and videos from our past programs at commonwealthclub.org. Now, if you're watching us live on YouTube, use the chat box to submit questions for our panel, and we'll try to work some of those into our conversation here today. And it's going to be a very good conversation to have today in a week in which we have seen the damage and impact of lawlessness in our country. Now, I want to introduce Michelle Meow, the producer and the host of the Michelle Meow Show and a member of the Commonwealth Club's Board of Governors. Good to see you again, Michelle.
Good to see you, John, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. Happy New Year. And John's right. I'm just so grateful for the Commonwealth Club of California for providing this platform for us to come together to have these important conversations, especially in the last 24 hours with what has transpired. Today, we'll be discussing racial injustice in the short documentary Ashes to Ashes. This film tells the story of avid Star Wars fan and master leatherwork artist Winfred Rembert, who survived an attempted lynching in 1967. The film also brings to light the extraordinary friendship between Winfred and Dr. Shirley Whittaker, while she's on a mission to memorialize the forgotten 4,000 African Americans lynched during the Jim Crow era, and also through a special homegoing ceremony. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you our guests for today. We have Taylor Reese, who's a filmmaker, photojournalist, and avid explorer. Her recent documentary, Ashes to Ashes, won Best Short Documentary at the Oscar qualifying River Run Film Festival. She directed From Curals with Love and co-directed The Ghosts Above with Renan Ozturk. She has shot and directed pieces for clients including National Geographic, The North Face, United Nations, and is a Sony artisan photographer. We have Dr. Shirley Jackson Whittaker, who attended Clark Atlanta University, completing a BS degree with honors in biology. She attended Yale University School of Medicine, Department of Public Health, and obtained her medical degree from Emory University School of Medicine, and was the only female African American in her class. A kidney specialist by trade, an artist trained under Leonard Baskin, and a healer by passion. And we also have Winfred Rembert, who's the subject of the film. Mr. Rembert grew up in rural Georgia, raised by his great aunt. Winfred worked with her in the cotton fields during much of his childhood. As a teenager, he got involved in the 1960s civil rights movement, jailed for fleeing for his life in a stolen car, nearly lynched, and then cut down to serve as an example to others. Rembert was sentenced to 27 years in the Georgia penal system. At the age of 51, he began to work more seriously with leather as his artistic medium, creating tooled and dyed canvases that tell the stories of his life. His paintings have been exhibited at galleries across the country, including the Yale University Art Gallery, the Adelson Galleries New York, and the Hudson River Museum, and have been profiled in the New York Times and elsewhere. So it is definitely my esteemed honor to introduce our entire panel. But before we begin our discussion, we'll take a look at a short clip of the film.
Art is a story. I don't know no other way you can say what art is besides it tells a story. I'm telling a story about my life, and it's gonna take 50 pictures to do it. I got 8 done. It's gonna take 50. I'm putting these pictures on here and they'll never fade away. Never. never dreamed that I had the talent to become an artist. But my wife kept telling me, oh, you can do it. You got talent, Winfred. You can do this and you can. But, you know, wives can say them kind of things, you know. But is it true?
Winfred has a true account of how we live, how we survive in the South.
I think we'll begin with just kind of how the documentary came together and the decision to do so. The film centers around the homecoming for the 4,000 who were lynched during the Jim Crow era, but with a focus on Winfred and his life told through another art form, another layer, his leather and his artwork. And so very interested to know kind of the decision to add another art form or another medium, which is to tell it through the lens of a camera. We can start with Taylor.
Yeah, it is a bit of a multi-layered art collaboration. This film started out, it wasn't something I sought out as a director. Shirley is actually a neighbor of mine. I grew up next to her in Amherst, Massachusetts. And gosh, Shirley, was it 2014, I think, when you were starting to organize Ashes to Ashes?
Right.
And you had that dinner party down the street, and my dad was there, and you had mentioned Shirley had mentioned she was looking for a filmmaker to help cover it. And so we just kind of volunteered to support that and put together a crew of shooters and advisors and writers that kind of helped to come together to document Shirley's process and her homecoming ceremony. And then Shirley, I mean, meeting Winfred and bringing Winfred into the story was really you. Do you want to share that day?
As far as meeting Winfred, that was because of a friend of mine she had seen my work, including Cotton, and she had seen Winfred's work, and she said, you got to meet this guy. He works in cotton just like you do. So we went to see an exhibition of Winfred, and while there, he commented about lynching. And I had started doing the work on the project, Ashes to Ashes. And in talking, he said that he had something about lynching. It wasn't clear to me. And so at the end of the show, I stood up and said I was from a small town in South Georgia called Waycross. And he just said, they lynched a lot of people where you're from. And that was true. So at the end of it, I went and talked with him, and he said that, I said, I don't understand what you were saying about lynching. And he told me then that he was in the process of being lynched, but they didn't finish. And then I asked him, would he come? Because at that time we started accumulating videos for the film. And I asked, would he mind coming to Amherst? And so I told Taylor father, and he told Taylor, and Taylor said, no, you go where he is. So we went there and we started videotaping Winfred, because the chance of finding someone who had lived through a lynching, and for me to be doing a project on that was just unbelievable. And so that's how we got Winfred into the process.
Did the initial kind of approach of what you wanted to accomplish in the film, I mean, did it go the way you expected, or, as you get into things, there are parts of the story that come up that you weren't expecting? I mean, what was that like?
I think that my part was doing a funeral service.
Yeah.
And to incorporate that into the film. And I think the realization of having someone who was lynched to tie that in, I think it worked out pretty good. And I thought it was great.
Well, can you go into a bit about that funeral service? Because that obviously is an important part of this film and an important part of this project. What for people who are totally from outside of the area and various traditions, what were you accomplishing there, and what was the meaning of that?
I always felt sad that people who were lynched, so often the Klan had this idea that if a family once they lynch someone, there's a chance you would never see that body again. They would burn the body up. They would tell, there was this saying that if you came and got the body, they will come and get you. So the body often was left to be there for the animals. And I always felt that we could not bring them back, but at least we could do was remember them and give them their ashes to ashes. Funerals are often not only for those, respect for those that passed, but also respect in a family. And a lot of families never got that chance to say goodbye because a lot of times they never saw their family member again. And that was by design. And so I decided that I was going to have a funeral service. And so I decided I had a wake, and Ruby Dee and Asa Davis' son came and did the music for the wake. I treat it as if it was a real funeral. And so on Friday night, we had a wake, and on Saturday, we had the service. We had a hearse, a glass hearse with a wooden casket in there with over 4,000 names. That hearse was pulled by these draft horses, big like Clydesdale, bringing that casket to church. I wanted it to be a big event for them. I want to be respectful, and I want to be a great remembrance. And I think when the casket was being brought into the church, and it was music with about 30 or 40 members of a choir singing, I've been buked and I've been scorned. And that's what I really wanted. And the nice thing about it, the service was in a church called St. John, named after John Brown, who was an abolitionist. It's a church where Frederick Douglass had spoke and Sojourner Truth. Unbelievable, stained glass, unbelievable. So I also felt that the United States need to deal with the hate. And I said that first part of healing as a physician, the first thing I do with the patient is that I want to know your history, because knowing your history, there's a better chance of me being able to help you. American has never really acknowledged the history of how brutal and destructive the act of lynching and terrorizing people. And so I felt that this is one step towards helping this country to heal. If you know your history, there's a chance you can heal or get better. When my patients tell me their history, there's a chance that I can help them to do better and to move on. So I think that's the overall idea of Ashes to Ashes, the funeral service, and to tie that in with an example of someone who had been lynched and what the tough part associated with that is lifelong heartache and pain that comes with that process. Not only for the person that was lynched or in the process of being lynched, but for the family and for that community.
Winfred, we saw in the clip, and you mentioned it many times throughout the documentary, that, well, one, you talked about art, and different art forms can be healing, but your art is not healing. And art is a way for you to tell your story. And so as a viewer, what I got from that is that you haven't healed from your story. That's the story, what happened to you, you have not healed from that.
No, that's no healing for me. I day in and day out, but it's just memories of my life, memories of what happened to me. It's just, I just go through it day in and day out. I just deal with it.
Winfred?
Yes.
Winfred, but can you share a little bit about how having Patsy with you has been kind of the light in all of this process?
Yes, that's the only thing I have with my wife. That's the only thing that I have for comfort. I get comfort from her, and she's there by my side to comfort me. That's the only comfort that I have is her. So
Yeah, and we see that throughout the documentary. I mean, the special relationship you have with your wife Patsy, and also that we learned that she has been such a strong support for you, even through the writing letters, getting out of incarceration.
Yeah.
Dr. Whitaker, I want to go back to Winfred shared in the documentary the everything that he's gone through, lack of sleep, the chronic stress, and the 40 years of surviving that very traumatic, horrific experience of the lynching and what has happened to so many families, and share with us how that trauma manifests if it's not healed in our bodies and our mind and our experiences and how we view ourselves.
With lynching, it's understandable that over this year, post-traumatic stress problems and inability to sleep. And when you have something like sleep apnea, inability to sleep, that damages you find people with diabetes, hypertension, all centered around just not being able to go through those five. REM sleep has 5 stages to it, and you need to go through all of those. Often they don't do that. That is lost. And it manifests in multiple medical problems. And trying to figure out how to balance all of those is very difficult. So it doesn't surprise me that if someone who have endured such horrendous mishap in their life, that it demonstrates by health issues, diabetes, hypertension, obesity, all of that funny from just the lack of sleep. And the psychological strain that come with the idea that someone wanted to take your life and you had no say in that. That trauma is long lasting. I mean, first time I met Winfred, he told me that he gets 2 hours of sleep a night, and that's with medication.
Yep.
The combination of all of these issues centered around not only around the fact that sleep apnea, just take that alone, not even consider the other things that go along, the psychological stress that comes with the fact that someone wanted to take your life, on top of inability to sleep that demonstrates itself. Sleep apnea is notorious for diabetes, hypertension, and all these associated into one human being, on top of the fact they may have some psychological problem associated fact that someone wanted to kill you. And that is long. So it doesn't surprise me that Winfred have some health issues and post-traumatic stress disorder on top of so many things. So it's not uncommon, it's expected. And the problem is, how do you deal with it? And that's always very difficult.
I know that I'm just not gonna get any rest. I lay there and I need to lay there and can't get any sleep whatsoever. And it's just a bad thing. It's just a bad situation that I'm up all night. I'm in a bad situation. I'm 2-3 hours of sleep a night, and
Okay.
I want to sleep so bad. I want to sleep so bad. I want to sleep, but I can't. But I can't.
Winfred, in your art, are you working on anything right now that you can tell us about?
Yes, I am. I work on. Right now, I'm working on some things. I try to tell my life story through my art. I try to use my art as a handle to tell my life. Right now, I'm sleeping in my bed and falling out of bed, and I'm on the floor sometime, and so or the witch is riding me. You never heard that story about the witch, have you?
No.
When you're half asleep, the witch is riding you. That's an old tale that the old folks tell.
Yep.
When you can't sleep, that means that the witch
Rode you
is
all night
right.
long.
Huh?
The witch rode you all night long, and then you wake
Yeah.
up not
The
really
witch,
having to
she
sleep.
rides you.
Right.
Yeah. And she rides me constantly.
Mm. As far as my go,
Oh, one quick thing too, maybe you could share is, you got the art, but you also have your book that you're releasing soon. How's that going?
Well, the book is going great, I think. So I'm waiting for the book to come out so that, I'm really, really tell some stories.
One thing, and Winfred, I remember this conversation that you and I had when, after we had heard your story and we had started to do some of those early edits. And I remember when I went to your house and shared that, early cut with you, and there was, the conversation started that the story that we see in Ashes to Ashes is such a small part of your life. Like, you have obviously had this huge life outside of this trauma, raising your family and all your kids and all the different decades of your art, and now this book. And so I think what I'm most excited about with the book is that it tells the whole story of your life, huh? Not just the part that we share in the film.
Was the witch riding me when I was talking to you?
Shirley, what are you working on?
well, I'm usually doing a combination of things. When I look back on what I've done as far as my art, I try to go. There's certain things I do as far as Southern painting, like the one behind me with cotton on it, because that's something that a lot of people have never seen real cotton. So I made sure that was in the painting. But the idea that they were respected no matter, that they were cotton pickers. So I tried to get a positive point in the work that I do. I'm finishing up a project I did. I'm talking with African Americans who are 80 and older. And I want to talk with them about why is it that we still survive. And I sketched them in the process of doing a book of etchings with them. I did a book of etchings that with Ashes to Ashes that's in the Library of Congress. Now I'm working on this one with African Americans who are 80 and older. I just want to know, how was it that we was able to survive 400 years of this?
To circle back a little bit, anyone who's looking forward to Winfred's memoir, the title is Chasing Me to My Grave, an artist's memoir of the Jim Crow South. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. That's coming out this year. Dr. Whitaker, we can hear you again. So I'm sorry, if you wouldn't mind repeating the last bit you were just saying.
As I said, I'm interviewing African Americans who are 80 and older who survived 400 years, just going on history and what they think, why is it that was able to survive 400 years. 4 years of Trump has helped people just dying. I'm saying, try 400 years of this.
Taylor, what was it like getting this film project together? I mean, did you have to go out and find funding and all the other people who you're going to work with? So what was that like? Take us through some of that.
When I first started working with Shirley, just kind of committing to support her, it was really just an idea to document for posterity the funeral itself. So our vision was to kind of create a 3-hour-long thing that she could show in the future at different churches and groups. And it wasn't an idea at the time to kind of make this into a short film. That happened somewhat serendipitously as it all evolved. But to film the funeral, which was the first step, we brought together a crew, a diverse crew as well. Shooter, director, writer Cameron Granger, who is a Black mixed media artist from Columbus and also a filmmaker, joined, and he became a huge collaborator and advisor in the whole process, and a good friend now as well. So kind of like, went into the funeral itself with just the idea of kind of documenting what happened, but getting to know Shirley as a character, as a woman an artist on this journey, seeing her hold so tenderly, and also just the pain of this history, and how she's working art as a way to work through that for the collective and for like this larger story was amazing. And just to be like, I think that there's something here. So we, she just lives down the street from my dad, went back and filmed with her a couple more times. And then when we got a chance to meet Winfred and go down and be with him in his home while you were doing artwork, and hear his story, which he shared with us on the very first day we ever met, even though we went back multiple times, and sometimes just to make Star Wars costumes and hang out, not always to film. But yeah, after kind of sitting with both of their stories, these two artists who were, Shirley's kind of working on the macro scale, and Winfred's work is so personal and relatable.
Thank you.
It felt like it was an opportunity to kind of weave their stories together into a short film, and also had an amazing collaborator and advisor, Allison Davis, who is a writer, and a bunch of people just came together. It was an unfunded project. A good friend of mine, Logan, did the music in 3 days. Just fell in love with Shirley and Winfred's story, and it was a rush to get it ready so that we could premiere in Telluride. We all got to come together there, and yeah, so just a journey of kind of an unexpected path, but that I really learned a lot on as well about, obviously these, as a white woman, this is not typically a place that I would seek out, but it was an amazing learning opportunity to understand kind of collaborative filmmaking and allyship through this, and really just make an art piece all together. So that's behind the scenes.
Yeah, well, and that brings up the obvious question of I'm interested in how different audiences react to it, or whether it's going over a painful time that they know about, or some of them who have not heard about this period and this practice. And I mean, some people have now been able to see the film, and I hope more will see it in the future as well. But what have you kind of gotten from different audiences? However you want to split it up: young people, old people, white, black. I mean, how are their reactions different?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, because clearly the film means a very different things, I think, particularly around racial lines. There are a lot of white communities that have seen the film, white audiences that just didn't have an understanding of this part of history and just like the scale of it, nor did they have an opportunity to kind of connect with someone who'd gone through it and have that emotional connection. So I got feedback, often from the white community that this was like an eye-opening kind of educational experience. We've done screenings with all Black community groups in the South, and it's a totally different thing. It's been, there's a group in Annapolis that was incredible, and just did some more like kind of deeper grounding conversations and celebrations of like Winfred's survival and his strength, and Shirley's art. And it's less about, education and understanding, and more about solidarity and processing and uplifting these artists. So yeah, definitely means different things to different people.
Thank you. Michelle?
Yeah. That's a great segue for Dr. Whitaker. Welcome back. And hopefully our connection's wide open and clear. You had mentioned in the film that the response, that some of the responses you got for doing the homecoming or the funerals for those who have been lynched, some folks were saying that why bring up something that's so horrible, that's so tragic, and your response to that was that we weren't talking about it enough. We weren't bringing it up enough, right?
I always say it's so horrible, it's so depressing. I said, try hanging from a tree and see how depressing that is. And to acknowledge these people, these human beings who had, I mean, being murdered for no reason and terrorized, on and on. And to acknowledge them and give some respect to them, I think was imperative. And for those that have a problem with that, this isn't a film for you, because it's one where we acknowledge Winfred, who's with us, and for those that are not with us, and acknowledge a group of Americans who endured long periods of time of being terrorized. And America has to acknowledge that. And they think lynch, or they say slavery is just like slavery. You just you get 3 meals a day and you have a place to live. But lynching, the intense torture that to go on for so many years and to be continued to this day, the definition may have changed, but the act is the same. You're destroying human beings, and that is something to be acknowledged and try to stop it. And America will not ever heal from this unless they acknowledge their history and give respect to that history.
Yeah, it's not just that it was the murders; it was that it was protected by the power structures, the local police authorities. I mean, all these. I can't imagine the horror of going through it, you or your family member, but then to know that there isn't even much recourse. I mean, and then yesterday we're watching video of people with swastikas and Auschwitz T-shirts, literally in the U.S. Capitol, terrorizing our senators and Congress members of House of Representatives. It's a massive need for education and I don't even know quite the word is, but coming to terms with this, it's also, I mean, it's a moral reckoning that I don't think countries do very well. And we had someone on one of our programs a while ago. I think it was Bakari Sellers, former state representative from one of the Carolinas, I forget which. But he was talking about how, and this was a few months ago, so he was referring to kind of George Floyd and the ongoing protests and such demands for racial justice. And he was saying, we've had these moments in our country's past where there was kind of a moment of clarity and a moment of alleged reckoning, but each time we missed, whether it was watching the attacks on the Pettus Bridge, watching George Floyd, or watching Barack Obama, the president of the United States, singing "Amazing Grace" at the killing of the church. Yeah. I mean, I think the word I was trying to reach for before is it's kind of hard to be hopeful, and I hate to say that because I'm usually a fairly optimistic person. Our times, I mean, you especially Dr. Whitaker, you were talking to people who were 80 and older and their experiences. Do they feel that times are different, or it's all just been rebranded with the same old horrible attitudes in this country?
I don't think they're surprised. They feel that what we're seeing now, when you look back in history, look at Grant and what he tried to do with the Klan, he supposedly gotten rid of the Klan, and because they were much stronger. And then Grant came and did what he tried to address the ex-slaves and how they were being tortured. But eventually the United States stepped back and just let them have the Klan have a free fall. And they would do mass murders, like 200 come to vote, they kill them all. And that is, there was nothing you could do, and nothing you could say. There was nowhere to go. There was no hiding place. They just had a free for all. And so that happened then, and we still think the fears are still here now, that there's no reckoning, that they can just shoot you down, and another way of lynching you or destroying you to this day. And that's a long time for a race of people to tolerate. And it shows up with lack of sleep, and health issues that come from that, and the fear that you live with every day. I have a son, and I fear that I'm gonna get a call and just tell him he's been shot and killed, and I know there's nothing I can do to protect him. But this is 2021, and you saw how they was doing yesterday in Washington D.C. We know if those was black, they would have slaughtered them all. There's no doubt about that. But this love, this respect for white supremacy has always been here, and I don't see it going anywhere, because until we recognize it being as terrorists, the things they have done, they felt that they have all right to do, and that's the sad part. The only thing you can hope for, that if with history, maybe you'll touch some people. My hope is that with Ashes to Ashes and what Winfred Taylor and I were able to do with Ashes to Ashes, that it can be used in some way to educate people. Because some people were really moved by Ashes to Ashes. Some people were shocked and got a little sliver of the pain during the funeral service, that people were crying all over the place when people, we had a part of the Ashes to Ashes program. You saw in the film where the guy stood up and talked about what happened to his son. That's a true story. And people just said, their eyes just know that couldn't have happened. Yes, it happened then, and it's happening now.
Michelle, I think you're on mute.
I'm on mute. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Whitaker. I am one of the viewers that were completely touched, by the film, but also a reminder of the horrific things that have happened in this country. And one thing that you said, this isn't Black history, this is American history. And in some ways, even if I wasn't living in that time, or that lived through that time, or there's experiences that I felt a responsibility, a social responsibility, that we have to be doing more. And so a question to Winfred, after what Dr. Whitaker had just said, and something that you had said in the film, about that there wasn't anybody that said what had happened to you was wrong, or what had happened to many African Americans that were wrong, because of what we're talking about, the people in power, and people are doing wrong things just based off of someone's skin color. Today, with the film Ashes to Ashes and the pieces of your leather work that have touched someone like me that you don't know, and I'm not Black, do you feel, that you could do more than a dent? Because that's how you ended, or there was a comment that you made, that you said that you didn't feel that you could change the world, but you certainly could put a dent to it. I think you could with your artwork and your story, and telling everyone out there and educating, like Dr. Whitaker was saying.
Yes, I probably could put a dent in it. I could. I love going into schools. I think going into schools are great. Talking to the young people, because talking to people, sometimes it changes things when they change things. So I love to talk to the young people, Black and white. So I could kind of get into their minds. And that's one thing I want to do. If I could do that, get in some of the schools. That's my first thing I want to do, get into the schools.
Winfred, as Michelle knows, I share an interest that, I'm sorry? You and I both are Star Wars fans, and I kind of wanted to ask you, because you talk about this in the Ashes to Ashes film. What do you love about that movie, and why did it connect with you so strongly, do you think?
Because it's a mind thing. The mind thing, the Jedi mind. Obi-Wan Kenobi. He controlled things with his mind. So I think mind controls. So
Y'all gonna have to excuse Winfred a little bit. He's a little lethargic today. His sugar was a bit elevated, but he's trying to hang in there. So
We're thrilled to have him as part of this. So thank you. Michelle?
Yeah. We'll go, back to also Taylor, something that I had said in the acknowledgement, and then the sometimes we don't see it ourselves, the change that we could be. And if Winfred didn't participate in the documentary, and you just showed his leather work, his artwork, we would have been able to see the story clearly, or know his story clearly from his artwork. But there was something that you did with the camera work, going in between, close-up shots of Winfred's artwork, and while he's narrating his story. And if you could just talk a little bit about, what that process was like for you, and maybe even the first time when you saw, Winfred's artwork, and knowing his story, and kind of what the emotions were for you.
Yeah, it was a pretty, I mean, the pieces in person are just stunning. And I think, we feel so lucky to be able to have the days that we did with Winfred in his home and in that art studio. And it's a very small little studio, so we're all kind of huddled together, and it created a really, I think, just intimate and supportive space where Winfred and Patsy were able to kind of share what the work has meant, and we were able to be there and film him making it. But yeah, we've been lucky enough with a couple of the film festivals before COVID hit to actually screen the film and bring all of Winfred's art to galleries. And it was like a whole nother emotional experience to go through, like completely separately, to see these huge, 5-foot tall pieces that are rich with stories, and they're texturized, and you can, having sat there with him and heard the sound of the mallet, and just like knowing what a full-hearted and vulnerable experience each of these pieces was pretty magical. And we got to bring Shirley's art into that as well, her etchings, her books. So I think, yeah, it's interesting that the short film itself is about art, but that the film has become a small vessel for getting to take to share, for Winfred and Shirley to have these days when we've been able to share that work with people in person. And I hope we all get to have those experiences again, because their artwork is really incredible in person.
I know that Winfred, it's okay if we can say goodbye to you now as we're closing out, and then we'll have Shirley and Taylor conclude for us, and much a little bit about Ashes to Ashes, and perhaps how people can see the film in the future. So we will thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and for hanging through the time here in this afternoon. We really appreciate you, and again, so honored to have you share your story, especially through Ashes to Ashes. And so as we wind down, Dr. Whitaker, I feel like it would be a missed opportunity if we didn't get to this point to ask. I know I really appreciate the healing and the acknowledgement of the trauma we suffer, especially the Black community, and the racial injustice in this country. And I think for so many who are acknowledging what has happened in the last 24 hours, or even the last 4 years, and we're being realistic that a lot of the injustice has continued, that the supremacist structures are still there. What are your thoughts in terms of, if we have this chance, 2021 and going forward, for us to really dismantle, those areas of injustice that we face today?
It's hard to fight a disease if you don't acknowledge disease is there. And I think that's imperative. I don't know how to heal, in dealing with patients. The first thing I do is I get history. because that helps me to help them. And this country has to acknowledge what they have done over 400 years. And then the patient comes and tell you, I have a hearing problem, I got a kidney problem, I automatically know what kind of kidney problem they have, and then I know what I can do to help them. So that first America has to acknowledge, because America doesn't really think that they've done anything. They really don't acknowledge the power that they have given to white supremacy. They haven't acknowledged how terrorized the Black community and community of color is in this country. And I think that's the first step. And hopefully, when you see ashes, the ashes, maybe to make you think about it and not to take it so lightly. Because some people don't see the big deal. You know, we just hang them and then it's over with. It's quick. They don't know there are 3 stages to lynching. Winfred told me that. And the 3 stages, I wasn't even aware of. And to go through those stages before the final part where they see them from the noose. That's the part that Winfred went through was the first stage. And there are 2 others after that. But to know they even exist, that they happen. Mm-hmm. And that's a part of the history of this disease of this country is first thing to help eliminate this disease is to acknowledge. And hopefully the ashes can serve as a first step when we look at it and says, did that really happen? And then to acknowledge that it did. And then the impact of that we still see today and what can be done to try to, eliminate that. Acknowledging the people yesterday was terrorists. And what they did is what they've done over and over again, but no one pushed them back and said, no, let's not accept. They were doing it to what they did yesterday in Washington, D.C. was done to predominantly white people. But they've done this for 400 years to people of color. Acknowledge that. And now don't tell me you're just going to walk away. Well, we don't want to get into that. No. You need to deal with, accept it, acknowledge it, and then you can.
It makes me think of a comment someone shared online this morning, maybe an hour or 2 before our program. It was a comment made by someone who was one of the rioters who, when there was some police pushback and there was the shooting of that one woman, this person was like, what are they doing? The police are shooting at us. They're supposed to shoot at BLM. Now they're shooting at patriots. I can't even pretend to get into the mind of someone who would think that way, but unfortunately, a ton of people apparently do. I want to go in a different direction just because I have no hopeful way of ending that sentence. Dr. Whitaker, I've known a fair number of doctors in my life. I've known a fair number of artists in my life. Mm-hmm. The Venn diagram of those two doesn't often, show a lot of overlap. How did these 2 parts of your life, how did these 2 aspects of yourself come to be? I mean, were you an artist first, or were you into medicine first? And is there a connection, or are they just 2 parts of your soul that you're working with?
When I look back on my life, I realized that I was doing some form of art when I was 3 or 4 years old. My cousin took me out on the road. We didn't have a paved street. He told me, you can draw whatever you want. You just draw all day. So I was out in that Georgia sun, just drawing on all day. And then the next day I was shocked that someone drove over my artwork. So I look back on my life, I've always used it. And if I found myself in a situation where I was not happy, I would take a pencil, a pen, and start drawing. So I know it has always been there, and always found some peace and joy from some form of art. I've always had this thing of caring for people and having this sympathy for people and wanting to see what I could do to make things better. So I think that overlap. I think that I've tried to use my artistic ability to educate people and use that as a learning tool in some way. And that's what I've tried to do. And I think it's made me relieve a lot of tension and unhappiness when I can find a way to do something. My thing is, don't complain if you don't have a plan. And so my plan may be that I do some artwork in reference to that. And I think that tend to help me. And I hope the artwork I do can be used to help other people too.
Mhm.
I think the world needs to see Ashes to Ashes, and all ages and all people of backgrounds, especially if we have ongoing conversations around again the supremacist structures and systems and authority and power, and how that impacts our lives. How can we get healthy? How can we get healthy? If the disease is always going to be there, and so the big and most important question all hour long is how can people get an opportunity to see Ashes to Ashes and what's coming up for Ashes to Ashes?
Okay.
Taylor? I think they've made an effort to try to make it accessible to a lot of people. As far as whether or not it's going to get better, as I said, patient come to me, I don't know what their problem, may be, but I get that history and I try to look at a structured way to make things better. But knowing that history will help. And I think that acknowledging the history of this country and how people have been terrorized for so long, acknowledging that and try to find a way to make that as not, doesn't stop it from happening and find a way to do that. And that will help healing, to acknowledge it. And then you can, as I said, when I know our patient history, I can look at the problems there and try to find a way. Once I get that history, and once America get the history, you won't be able to heal all your patients, but you hopefully will be able to help some and make life a little bit better for those that want to work with you. It's a contract between the doctor and the patient that we have to work together to accomplish a goal. And I think that's the step that has to be.
Taylor, we actually don't have questions on our chat box on our YouTube video, but we're getting lots of comments and there are lots of thanks for all three of you. And one recurring theme that comes up through these is thank you for sharing these stories. People have to know these stories. Comment about specifically thanking Dr. Whitaker for, getting the stories of Black people over the age of 80 and thanks for telling these stories about the experiences people have gone through. Taylor, you're in the job of telling stories and highlighting stories. This is going to be the oldest question ever asked of filmmakers, but it's always interesting to me. What do you see doing next, or what is your next project? And what are you hoping to tell there?
COVID pending, I've recently moved to rural Colorado, and a good friend of mine, Jade Begay, who is Navajo and Tewa based in New Mexico. She and I are going to be collaborating on a story about the Intermountain West, going from rodeos to powwows, looking at how interconnected landscapes are keeping us together, and also where kind of cultural ties differ. And I grew up in the Midwest, so looking to do something collaborative and close to home for this coming year, which I'm really excited for.
So the last question, and I don't think I caught it, but yeah, so can people see Ashes to Ashes soon, or how can they see Ashes to Ashes?
We have some exciting news coming up. We are getting distribution. I think we're launching on January 13th. I'm not exactly sure if I can say who, but I think if you stay tuned, or if you've seen this talk on the Commonwealth Club site, I'm sure maybe you guys will have a link to share at some point. But yeah, in just a couple of days, we'll be launching publicly on a site.
Exciting.
Awesome. That's so great. I want to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon and for this very important conversation, and for sharing Ashes to Ashes and stories of your work, of your life, and acknowledging our horrible history, what we've done to other Americans, the 4,000 who have been lynched. Thank you, Dr. Whitaker. Thank you, Winfred. Thank you, Taylor, for joining us today. John, I'll let you have your last words.
I of course repeat Michelle's thanks, but also thanks to everyone who's watching this and listening to the podcast later, because you're the ones who need to tell these stories on to others. And so share this video, share the podcast, and come back and see us in the future. You'll find all of our upcoming programs at commonwealthclub.org. We wish everyone a safe and healthy rest of this week. Take care.